Sahana vavatu, sahano bhunaktu, sahaviryang karavavahai, tejasvina vadhitamastu, ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Chapter 16, some additional introduction, is divided into 5 parts. And we're currently doing the first part. Part 1, that is verse 1 to 3, talks about qualities of a daiva, of a divine being. So one who is divine, what are their qualities like? How do they carry themselves? How do they conduct themselves? How are they in real life? What do they know? What do they think? What do they believe? How do they communicate with the world? How do they see themselves in the light of knowledge, in reference to others in this world? How do they communicate with their parents? How do they treat stress? What do they do when they feel fear? What are their primary qualities that exude in and through their personalities? How much effort do they put into work compared to an ordinary person? What is their relationship to death? And what is their relationship to the total? So all of these qualities is what that one, the wise person, has or enjoys or has developed. Some qualities may be lesser, some qualities may be more. It doesn't mean that all the qualities have to be developed, but certain qualities help us to expand our vision. So verse 1 to 3, the first section, is qualities of a daiva sampat, of a divine being. Part 2 is verse 4 to 6. 4 to 6 is introduction to asura sampat. Asura sampat are those demonic qualities that are working against the harmony of the whole, qualities that are damaging to the whole. Therefore, verse 4 to 6 is part 2, and it talks about introduction to asura sampat, to these demonic qualities. And then verse 7 to 21 talks about these qualities in detail. So we will really get to see what are those qualities that are lower in nature, that are stripped out of intelligence, that are stripped out of goodness and morality. What happens if that morality gets stripped out? How does that produce a behavior? And what kind of behavior does that produce? How does that change the words that we use in reference to ourselves and the world and others? How do we see others and how do we describe others? All of these changes, behavioral, psychological, emotional, all of them start to change in a very subtle way when morality is pulled out. And the question is, what is it that sustains or lets morality flourish? And therefore, we have to simply hear about part 1, verse 1 to 3, qualities of a daiva asura. So it reminds our psyche, what are those clean, harmonious qualities that when we carry them, we feel good about ourselves, we feel good about others in our environment, about in our presence, and so we can just have a good time. So that good time needs to be done through 2 parts. Number 1, verse 1 to 3, part 1. Having heard part 1, let me hear about part 3, that is verse 7 to 21, specific qualities about a being who is living as though righteous and yet is living through a distorted perception, thinking that it is the correct way and yet misguided in an unknowing fashion. Therefore, we are bringing 2 sides to master our minds. And then part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, which is from verse 22 all the way to the end, we will conclude with this session of chapter 16. Okay, so this is the structure, how we are going about this class. So last week, we talked about revision, abhayam, which is fearlessness. So let's talk about fearlessness a little bit more, because there's a lot more to the topic than we generally introduced last week. So I want to ask you a question. Suppose you're concerned about the future, unsure, uncertain, what may happen, what could happen with you, with those that you love. those that you care about. Suppose that you have anxiety, a little bit of uncertainty there. Would that be a fair statement that there is a little bit of that in regards to the future? Maybe a little, maybe a lot, it depends. Yeah, so this, as I speak, is natural. If you didn't have this, you would probably be a non-empathetic human being. So compassion, which is an inherent intrinsic quality to a human being, that compassion expresses itself how? In reference to the future, in reference to those who you love, who you care about, as that anxiety, as that fear that something may happen. So don't mistake that for the need to protect, the need to uphold the values in my environment and protect myself as a human being. That means care about my mind, care about my physicality, care about family. How do we stay above fear? By not turning neurotic, being neurotic. Future, 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 future. Right? What will happen after death? Suppose that is a question. Where will I go? Will I come back? Will I be reborn? Has all of this spiritual effort gone to waste? These are fair questions, but suppose they take over the individual, right? And all they can think about is this question. I'm afraid about death. I'm afraid about death. So my question to you is, during the time of this course, which went so far for 4 years, has your relationship changed to, for example, death? Think about that. Before you attended this course, you had a certain vision about death. We are now here today. Is your relationship to death different? Okay. Is it emotionally different? Is it touching you in a different place? If yes, then that means you are progressing. Okay. And that progression is that lack of fear. So in other words, I'm showing that you already have this principle called abhayam, which is fearlessness. Otherwise, you would have still had the same relationship to death 4 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 year ago. Just the fact that you change your emotional status pertaining to different parts, different truths in life, reveals that you already are enjoying this abhayam, fearlessness. So we need to learn how to cope with changes. Because what is a change? Is change not future? Isn't future just change? Because when you think of the future, you think what? Change. If I think of change, I'm thinking something that is different back tomorrow that is not the same right now. So future and change are one and the same. Now, remember when we read the book last week about Dayananda stating that one of the causes of fear is future? Okay. So what do we need to do in reference to the future? We need to learn how to cope with the future intelligently. And I'll give you an example. In the Mahabharata, Parikshit was given 7 days to live. Someone told him, are you going to live for 7 days? Sorry, you've been cursed. And you're sure you're going to die in 7 days. Absolutely sure. So what did Parikshit do? He found a popular sage who knew, had wisdom, who knew the truth. Sage Shuka. Sage Shuka. So he came up to him, sat down, and said, Sage Shuka, I've only got 7 days to live. Give me that knowledge. Once given, rebirth is no more. And Sage Shuka said, oh, you have said rightly, my young one, my son. And yet, I must say, you are very fortunate, for I know not even what's going to happen to me in the next 1 minute. And yet you are certain that you have the next 7 days to live. How fortunate you are indeed. Now, let me give you that knowledge. Once known, there is nothing else to know. And so Parikshit was imparted that knowledge. So the question is, imagine you had 7 days to live. What would you do? Would you be like Parikshit? He goes for what's highest. You would do whatever you value right now the most. That is what you would do if you had 7 days to live. So think about that. If you had 7 days to live, what would it be? Where would you go to first? Would you worry about saying goodbye to your employees, mom and dad, closing your bank account, transferring the money to someone else's, taking the money out of the share market, putting it into the house, or delegating it to the children or family or so on, or you would go straight to that one who knows the truth, and you would say to him or her, "Oh, wise one, give me that wisdom. Let me hear a discourse that shares the highest truths that there are. For I want nothing more than to stop this rebirth. Give me that knowledge now, because I value that more than anything else." Would you say that? Or would you do something else? The point is, how do you and I manage or cope with changes? Are we like Parikshit? Or we would get nervous, we would get so sad, we've only got 7 days, and the rest of them got so much more, it's so unfair. What would you do? How do you cope with changes? It is all about the attitude. Therefore, fearlessness is having that right approach towards coping with changes. Now, let's take you through a journey of showing you how many changes you've already coped. Okay. What is the one biggest change that we'll start out with? A big, huge change. Let's take us through a journey. It all starts when you're inside that cozy, comfortable universe, inside the mother's womb. Warm, nothing to do, relax, as though infinity. And then the first change happens. Everything changes. Now it's a different world. Air. Would you believe that at one point you were alive and yet you were not breathing? That was the womb. And from that moment, I am alive and yet I am breathing. That is a huge change. That's what we all went through, this one change. And then by year 2, what happens? By year 2, the personality has already been sculpted. By year 2, the identity of that child that you and I were as a body has been sculpted already. And what happens then? The perception of the world changes. Baby is born. It sees, but it cannot call it a cloud. It has no concept of a cloud. So it all sees as though in 2-dimensionality. Why so? Because there's no form to define whatever is being seen. I cannot put a distinct name form called cloud onto that formation of water vapor. So by year 2 of the baby, what happened? It already got a general perception, a general capturing of the world. I may not know it's called a cloud in my local language, but I know it is different than what looks like a tree. That by year 2 has already sculpted the baby's personality, and therefore another major change. And then what happens? By adolescence, we encounter emotional changes, psychological changes, intellectual changes. At what kind of levels? Firstly, for example, we sever ties with those called family. We learn to include others who are not part of our blood family into our accomplishment, into our accommodation. That is another change we go through. And then we go and explore with the opposite sex. That's another massive change that we go through. By year 20 to year 22 plus minus 23, what happens then? We have this big vision. I want to reform the world. Let me bring some changes to the world. Maybe some greenery, maybe some waterworks, some work with the trees, replanting trees. Another change. And then we join the workforce. Now we have to be inside a corporation or a company whose hierarchy of values may be very different to ours. And then we have to negotiate our values with theirs. My value is honesty. Your value is profit over honesty. So now we have to go through a change of figuring out, how do I reconcile my values with the company while still keeping myself happy and keeping the company happy, because I need the bills after all to pay for my house. That's another massive change. And then marriage. So we find someone and we include them in our family, in our presence. And then what happens? Instant lifestyle change. No more can I make decisions on my own. Have it my way, whenever I want, when I want it, in the exact quantity that I want it. That is gone instantly. Now we need to redefine the terms called what? Compromise and sacrifice. These two terms get redefined and keep getting redefined. That is another change throughout marriage. Before, the word sacrifice was something that is to stay away from. Compromise, I don't want to compromise. Now we are forced. That is a change. One may choose or one may not choose to have a child. Doesn't really matter. But if one does choose to have a child, that can be advantageous. How so? because one goes through a massive change called what? Negating their previous need to have it my way, called selfishness. And now one really has to teach to give all they got to another human being. That is called learning to be emotionally independent, drawing from yourself so that you can give to someone else. Finding that power within to give to someone else. That is another massive, major change that we go through. And then midlife crisis. What is midlife crisis? It may not come at half of your life exactly. That does not really mean that. It may come early, it may come later. It depends on how inquirous you are about reality. If you're really inquirous, what's going to happen? That midlife crisis is going to come earlier. In what form? You're going to ask yourself, have I done all that I wanted to do? And what has all of these doings led me? What kind of life am I living today? Am I happy as a result of all of the doings that I have done? Could I do something more? What else can I do, or what else can I do to find happiness? Am I happy? And what things really do make me happy? Have I forgotten that innocence that I once had when I was young? Have I transformed my way into someone that I don't like? Have I transformed myself into someone that I do like? All of these questions are forced to come to someone's life because they too are part of Ishvara's order. So if someone does not inquire into the reality, into themselves, into the world, then they will still be forced to inquire through what's called midlife crisis. And then the death of a parent, maybe mom or maybe dad. That's another major change. Death of a parent. And some people say once the parent goes, wherever you're close to, it's like a void. It's like a void, like something's been taken away from me, at least someone that understood me, that had more compassion and more love than anyone else would I ever find. Could be either your mom or could be either your dad. Or maybe you won't have that relationship with your parents right now, but still, there is another massive change that we all are forced or compelled or propelled to go through, whether we like it or not, because that is part of life. And then what happens? Age. And then we go, oh, my senses are declining. My senses are going away. Hearing is going away. Sight is going away. Another change. Hair is starting to lose its texture and its brightness and its color. The subtle body gets separated from the physical body. And that is another major change. So the question is, how do we cope with this? And the Bhagavad Gita tells us a very nice lesson. What does Bhagavad Gita say in relation to coping with changes? It says that Ishvara, being the nature of all intelligence and all power. So for example, a magician has only so much intelligence, accountant has so much intelligence, a plumber has so much intelligence, but Ishvara has all of the plumber and the accountant and everyone else's intelligence. So it's all intelligence, all power. And this all intelligence, all power itself undergoes change. How and why? Because whenever you and I put something into the field called an action, that is an input that modifies Ishvara itself. In other words, Ishvara itself is modifying, constantly going through changes according to the inputs of actions that we put into the field. And therefore, then Ishvara provides the outcomes of our total actions into the field. So what does this mean? What does this have anything to do with fear, right? Fearlessness. Well, if you think about this intelligence, it's completely predictable. It's not like you put something into the field and you get something totally different. Isn't that true? You only put actions into the field that you know they're going to get those correlative results, right? If you want to, buy food, you go to the shopping because you know that going to the shopping is what's going to give you the food. Okay. So in other words, you have a sense of predictability in life. And this is where we have this faith in this intelligence called Ishvara. Hey, whatever I put is what I can get back. I'll give you an example of someone who coped with changes very well, just to make this a little bit more concrete. There was once a woman who she camouflaged her incapacity to say no. She camouflaged that as a spiritual trait of accommodation. So imagine that. You cannot say no, and then you justify that. I say yes because I'm accommodating everyone. I want to accommodate you, yes. And over time, she started to feel resentful, okay? Because even if she didn't want to do it, she still did it because she was compelled to say yes. So she decided to make a change. And what did she do? She said, from now on, I'm going to pause. I'm going to think about whether I am really saying yes because I'm forced to, or whether I really want to say yes. And that's all she did. She just took a little pause. And then what happened? Slowly, her self-confidence regained, because now she was only saying yes to things that she really wanted to do and no to those things that she absolutely didn't. But then she inquired, why did this happen in the first place? Why could I not say yes? And the answer was because she was looking for love. As a little child, her parents gave more love, more attention, more validation to her siblings. And so she thought the only way to win them back is how? By doing them a favor, by saying yes to any of their demands. And then what happened? This spilled over into adult life. And lo and behold, she's doing the same thing, saying yes, yes, yes. Why? Because that is her way of winning validation, winning someone's attention. And so she said, so that is why I'm doing this. So what does she do? What kind of change does she make? She made a massive shift from being honest towards whether she's saying yes or no, from the old paradigm of just saying yes because it's a cultural indoctrination or because it is an unresolved issue. So again, these changes is what fearlessness allows. Therefore, Abhayam is that one who makes constant changes. The second reason for fear, so there was once a lion, and the lion grew up with a flock of sheep. And so whenever a fox came, the flock would run away. But so would the little lion cub. It was actually not little, it was big now, big lion. Because the lion thought what? That he was a sheep. And then what happened? And then the lion one day came to a little pond, and this was a magical pond. So the lion was sipping some water, and then he looked at the reflection of the pond. And he saw, hey, why am I different from my brothers? My face looks different, my features look different. And then the pond, being magical, revealed to him a little bit more than that. He says, yes, it's right. You are actually a lion. You're not a sheep. And then he was having a little conversation with the pond, and the pond revealed to him, here's your identity. You are a lion. And the lion was now so convinced, so proud, so relieved to be in touch with his identity. From there on, the fear instantly dissipated right then and there. In other words, by not knowing my emotional intellectual makeup, what happens? The individual finds themselves in places that reveal all of the things that are lesser in nature, reveal my inadequacies, reveal my, all of the things that we don't like. In other words, all of the things that remind us of those lower things. So by finding knowing where we stand, we can find ourselves in the right places because your identity is compatible with that particular activity. And how do we do this? So if you're not inquirers, suppose I say to you now, do you know your emotional intellectual makeup really well, to the point where you know exactly how you are with people? What are your strengths? When do you get tired? What time do you get tired? What triggers you? How do you motivate yourself? How do you stay up? How do you uplift yourself? You know everything about yourself. Suppose you say, no, I don't really know anything about my individual self. I say, why is that? And you say, I don't know. And then I reply, well, that's because you're not asking questions about this individual. We usually ask questions about the world, right? What's happening in the news out there? What's happening with you? How is your things? But we don't ask questions about the individual. If we haven't asked those questions, we got another chance or another choice, and that's called personality profiles. And we have certain profiles like Hippocrates, the Four Temperaments, or Carl Jung's personality profile. So basically, it takes an individual and it helps you discover your place, right? What is it that makes you a person, like, so that you can find yourself in the right place, of course. And there's different profiling systems. There's one where it is 4 colors. Blue is loyal, red is passionate, yellow is fun, and white is peaceful. And then what they basically do is, if you're white, for example, the peaceful type, and then you find yourself whose partner is blue, like loyal. So the question now is, how do you make those loyal and a peaceful one? How do you make them work together? How does a loyal one adjust their language to speak with the peaceful? And how does a peaceful, what words does a peaceful say in order to soothe or make cause the affection on the blue part? Or how does the red, the passionate one, and how does the fun one, how does that come together? Imagine that, a red, passionate, and a yellow of fun. So in other words, it's a personality profiling system. I'll give you one now. Okay, it's a useful one, or it can be a useful one because we're just talking about this. So let's actually give you a personality profile now. And what's the point of this? It's just to show you how a personality profile can help you see yourself in a different light. When I say yourself, I'm talking about the person, the relative person, the jiva. So imagine 4 directions, 4 quadrants: north, south, west, and east. On the north, you put a high orientation towards people. In other words, you're sensitive to people, right? You like to get along with people, right? So in other words, on the top, the north is people oriented. On the south, we've got task oriented. Task oriented is I want to get it done. Let's get the task done. On the west, we have indirect. That means your style of communication is indirect. Now, what is indirect? It's more introverted, more softer, more quiet. On the east side, we've got the direct. And what is direct? It's outspoken, it's loud, right? It just wants to share it. Here's how it is, right? No sugarcoating, just direct. So now let's go west, north. Let's go indirect, people-oriented. This is called a relator. A relator is the one who is sensitive to people's feelings. It wants to please people. Before agreeing, we'll make sure that everyone in the group agrees and is okay with that decision. So suppose Lorena tells me something and it says, hey, what do you think, Andre? And I'm this personality profile. I am west, north. And I say, I've got a decision. But hold on, let me ask Julie, Mina, Nagesh, let me ask Vishal, Justine. I just want to make sure that everyone is happy so that we can all be on the same paper. And therefore, I'm in this way sensitive to every person. Okay, so this is something that we all share. It's not like you're totally just this one. This is maybe something that you enjoy. Now, the question is, suppose you're talking to this kind of type. How do you communicate with them? You speak patient, you speak softer, a little bit gentler, and you're very sensitive to their feelings. So if someone is west, north, you're sensitive to their feelings. Okay, you have to be patient with them. Now let's go west, south. West, south is indirect, task-oriented. This is called an analyzer. Analyzer is one who is adamant about the details. Give me the specifics, right? Now, how do you talk to these types? These types, you have to be very specific. They love to work with numbers, data, like engineers, mathematicians, researchers, journalists even. In other words, they like to analyze the story, analyze the numbers, analyze the things, and extract the details out of it. Now, they're a little bit less sensitive to people because they are indirect and their orientation is towards tasks. Do it. Let's do it right now. Now, let's go direct south. Director. In other words, imagine a direct type, outspoken, and at the same time, they are task-oriented. What do you think this is going to be? A director. In other words, bottom line, results. Let's cut to the chase. Just tell me the technique that's going to get the results. That's all I want to know. In other words, they can be slightly insensitive to people. They're like, hey, what is this emotional business? Let's just get our duty done. It's about getting the job done, right? Emotions has no place in this. Now, it's not like these people are good or bad. This is not about defining. It's just letting you know how we all have these personalities inside us. For example, you got, from Shark Tank, who was it? Kevin O'Leary, the outspoken, or Mark Cuban. It's like, hey, let's cut to the chase. Just give me the numbers. What is your bottom line? What's your projections for the next 6 months? And what is your exit plan? Right? Tell me how it is. So in other words, they're direct and they are task oriented. And then we go direct and we go north. So in other words, we go people, a socializer. So in other words, they are direct, outspoken, and they provide cheer to the environment. In other words, they're a talker. They like to talk. They like to share stories. Now, how do you communicate with these types? You have to ask them a question. Right? You have to ask them a question because then they will say so much about whatever it is that they want to share. So this is just an example of knowing yourself through this profiling system, and therefore you can align your strengths in the right place. And then the quality of sattva samshuddhi. This was purity of the mind. And purity of the mind just means preserving whatever thoughts keep you clean. And we all know what this is. We don't actually have to say what it is, but you know. So if you were to write down 10 things that keep your mind holy or sanctified or clean or something that's beautiful, something that you can find yourself hanging out with, something that you enjoy carrying upon you. Okay, what thoughts would make that mind that kind of a companion that you have affection for, right? A mind that is gentle, clean, soft. It's working with you, not against you. That is a product of thoughts, clean thoughts. So sattva samshuddhi is mental purity. Now, mental purity comes through the time. It cannot be forced. In fact, it's counterintuitive to try to force this. The more we force it, the more we get frustrated. Frustration causes anger. Anger depletes our intellect. Intellect makes us go back into the emotional response system, and that feeds the cycle, that loop. Okay, let's move on to Nyana Yoga Vya Sthitihi.
The MBTI personality profile, which is often done in corporations and things like that, I think it's quite well known in research. I personally found that really, really interesting and very, very helpful, not only for myself, but all my family as well.
Why is it helpful? How so?
Because I think it really, I was shocked at how accurately it describes people's way of perceiving the world, which is all through different filters, priorities. And when I read mine, I was totally shocked. And also, it really helped me relate to my children. And also, I really understood my husband more, who's very different from me.
Wow.
How come? And that it is absolutely, he is a perfect reflection of his programming, as am I, as everybody is.
Wow.
And I thought it was so helpful. I talk to my friends about it a lot. I said, if you want to understand someone, try and get their MBTI and just understand really where they're coming from.
Right. Alison, can you give us one example? How so would this be beneficial or practical in life of taking such a profiling system? How could it help, one of us to maybe, what does it do for us?
Yeah, I think it just takes self-doubt away, because we're sometimes puzzled about our own motivations and other people's motivations. And although there's obviously some flexibility within that, it's shocking how with such strong programs. So really it's a real aha moment. You can understand why you're feeling and thinking and believing certain things according to your program. And it's exactly that. And it's kind of shocking because we all think we're unique and special. And of course, we've all had different experiences.
Indeed.
Yeah, Andre, we're talking about the Myers-Briggs personality type indicator here. And I've worked with it fairly extensively professionally.
Yeah.
And you need to be careful because it's composed of binary opposites. So the first line is introvert, extrovert. So you identify yourself as introvert or extrovert. But then there's a category called a learned extrovert or learned introvert. So you may be naturally introverted, but you work in a sales job. You will teach yourself to extrovert your qualities to be successful in that role. Yeah. And over time, you form habits to incorporate that into your personality structure. Also with binding opposites, humans are more complex than that. So,
Robert, you just brought a good point. Even though these profiling systems are useful, remember, they're still compartmentalized. They're still localized to their specific view on the basis of who created it. So whatever the creator author knows, their very knowledge is going to dictate or modify that personality profile by the time that you take it up. Because it always goes back to that creator of that material, because that too is limiting. So be careful of this part. And that is why if you do want to use this profiling system, maybe take 2 or 3. right? But take it with a grain of salt.
Yes, and if you take this test, like if you do your first test today and after 2 years, the results might change because our personalities keep developing. The concept behind this is that human being is here to accomplish the particular end of moksha. Whether one discerns it, this is what everybody wants. Nothing less will satisfy the human heart. Since the basic problem is one of the self non-acceptance, acceptance is possible only when a person discovers the self to be free from any lack, in other words, complete. And the self happens to be complete. Discovering this fact releases the individual from his erroneous sense of imperfection. When this is the ultimate end, all activities are reduced to duties. Then by conforming to these well-defined duties, one can neutralize the likes and dislikes, raga, dveshas, that disturbs the basic pursuit of moksha. Certainly, there is sacrifice and yielding when the raga or dvesha is not in keeping with dharma. But every time you give up, you grow because what you give up is less than what you are. As this inner growth takes place, you gain certain amount of dispassion or objectivity, which becomes natural in time. Therefore, to make a person emotionally, spiritually, and ethically an adult, you require a suitable infrastructure. This was provided in the Vedic society by what we call Varna Ashram Dharma. In this system, each person has a given occupation determined by the family into which he was born, Varna Dharma, and certain behavioral norms dictated by his stage of life, Ashrama Dharma as a student, householder, one who is preparing for renunciation, and a renunciate.
One who conforms to this is called an Adhikarta Purusha. He is enjoined to perform certain duties. What is to be done in a given situation is usually very obvious. That is duty. When one's pursuit is only towards that, even though there may be the tendency to do something else, what is done is duty. As a result, the person becomes a master of his own raga dveshas and enjoys what we call Daivi Sampat. Whether he is defined as a Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Sudra, in terms of his vocation, he is a Brahmana by quality. This is reflected in his disposition and attitude. The qualities of such a person are described in these 3 verses. They are either natural to him or he is mindful of his activities in terms of these values. To develop a disposition in which sattva is predominant, a duty-based structure is helpful. By doing your duties, whatever they are, you become a Brahmana. In a society in which everybody is trying to become a Brahmana by doing what is to be done, there is no competition. Until recently, the concept of duty was very much a part of Indian culture. Today, of course, the society is changing and the Varna Ashrama system is breaking down, but the spirit is still valid. Any given situation presents itself in a form which necessitates an appropriate action. That action becomes duty.
One of the points that he mentions is the whole Varna system, the caste system. It is, see, if the human being loses track, if they lose their own path, then they don't know which way to go. So the society, the Vedic society had this brilliant system, the Varna 4 system, whereby the individual simply has to subordinate to the system, and the system will take them through the journey. And it says that the whole point is to go from the Sudra, the laborer, the Vaishya, the entrepreneur, in other words, the Kshatriya, the protector, and to go all the way to the Brahmana, the one with knowledge. And so the system has been set up to help the individual progress. And so we can see the brilliance of this Vedic culture, how it actually helped the society progress. And of course, it says that this system is breaking down because unfortunately, people are choosing too many things nowadays, so it'll be confusing. Nyana yoga vyastitihi. This means steadfastness in jnanam. Jnanam means knowledge. In this case, see, it depends on how you want to interpret this. I'm going to use this Nyana dharma specifically. We're not talking about Atma Jnanam, but the knowledge of these principles between verse 1 and 3. So a knowledge, firm knowledge of this Jnanam, of this dharma, in other words, and yoga, followed by yoga, which is practice. So in this case, Jnana yoga means practice of that dharma. I know you can interpret this in a different way. You can say Jnana yoga means self-knowledge, and you need to participate into that, as Dayananda just explained. But I'm taking a slightly different here. So if you look at knowledge, and does knowledge happen naturally? Question for you. Does knowledge take place by itself? Or you have to deliberately, assertively hunt for it, look for it, digest it, assimilate it, assemble it, restructure it, bring it into your mind, work on it, chew it, sometimes spit it out, depends on if it's a bad knowledge. Is that not true? Does knowledge come to you automatically, or you have to go and get it? You have to go and get it. Unlike experience, experience happens, and we, just by our living, experience happens. So we don't have to hunt for experience. For example, let's take Buddha. That's a nice symbology. Now, whatever happened to Buddha is actually not important. We need to extract the lessons. Just like Mahabharata, did the war happen or not? It doesn't matter at all. I tell you, it is about the lessons that we get to extract out of that brilliant story. So Buddha, we often portray him as the one that just sat there out of frustration underneath that Bodhi tree and suddenly attained enlightenment, right? This is the tradition. This is maybe the general image that goes in people's minds. And they say, oh, okay, so all you have to do is just go over there to a Bodhi tree, ideally, or peepal tree. Just sit down and, you'll get something's going to zap you. Something's going to happen, right? But okay, we're not denying that Buddha's enlightenment is there. But what did Buddha do before that? Before he sat down on that tree? What was his life before that? He was a seeker. He was involved. He was talking. He was discussing. He was debating. He was learning about all systems at that time. Inquiring into the Vedic scriptures, like what are they? Who wrote them? Why is it like this? Why is it not something else? Who are these gods? What are they actually giving us? Where are they? How do we prove them? All of these questions he was already going through. As a result of his work, then he finally sat down in a peaceful place. And the mind, by the way, always needs a peaceful place like that. So it's a nice symbology where you take all of your jnanam and you sit down in that uninterrupted place and you can think about what's actually going on in there. In other words, the knowledge doesn't get activated until we sit down in silence and we can deliberately start to pull it out and we can start to see what's inside that little bubble of knowledge. That requires time, deliberate assimilation of knowledge. This is called assimilation. Whether you're talking dharma or you're talking self-knowledge, jnana yoga, doesn't matter. You still need to think about it. But not only think about it, so what? We need to, once we get up from that tree, what do you need to do? You need to apply yoga. You need to practice it, incorporate it into small things. You see a friend and you need to think, pause. What quality can I now bring up and then incorporate it into my conversation so that I can practice it? For example, we will learn about compassion. And when you hear about compassion, you can say, stop. Here I am. My wife is before me. My husband's before me. My friends before me. My employees before me. Let me just bring that teaching and let me just apply in one simple gesture, one simple word. Let me mix compassion and hello. Before there was no compassion and hello. It was just a mechanical hello. But now you bring in compassion, you envelop that word hello with compassion, and you throw it out there, and you just see how that feels. It's a different experience. This is called incorporating that wisdom, whereby every opportunity that we have around us, at least when you come to interact with people, brothers and family, those close ones, they're the best, by the way, because we take them for granted. We say, no, I'm going to start with someone fresh. No. You start with that one who is right in front of you. They are the hardest to apply with, but they are the most beneficial. If you can get it with those closest to you, then everything else becomes much easier. Yoga, deliberate incorporation. Okay. If we don't deliberately incorporate it, what's going to happen? It's going to get overridden by old notions. We don't stand a chance. The old notions have such a strong force from the past that if we do not deliberately, consistently integrate, that's called yoga, the overridden, the old stuff is just going to get, slowly starting to flood our minds. And then once again, we find ourselves with that old pattern. No change. Why? Because I have not persisted with my yoga. Can you give me one example how to practice something?
Yeah, hi. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Usha.
Hi. So there is one way which I think I try to practice is I look at God in everybody. Even if I'm angry, even if I'm irritated, I say that there is a divine being in that person. And so let me try to, it's just a trial, of course, but it's a thought and I need to practice it constantly because, of course, as you said, we go back to our own ways and it's very difficult, but it's a good thought to have. And why not aspire for the highest? So I try to do that, failing most of the times, but just as I try to see the divine in everything, everybody, and that brings a sense of a beautiful sense of compassion.
Usha's got a great method, and she said that, even before you see someone, then you can just say deliberately, okay, now I'm about to see them. Let's just envelop myself with a little bit of patience, a little bit of compassion. Let me just wear the suit of compassion. I'm going to act as if I am Mr. or Mrs. Compassionate. You just walk in, okay, hello, okay, I'm still keeping it up, compassion. If it starts to feel uncomfortable, let it go. But at least you try, because if you try for 1 second, you probably do it for 5 seconds next time. Okay, so there's no pressure at all.
And also another thing helps, which sometimes kind of, a person is, before you find the divine in the other person, there is a little bit of chance that you get back to being your old little self and you say, hey, this person is always going to react like this and always going to be like that. So in that case, I try to practice not being judgmental and say, let it go, let it be. It's not about them, it's about me. And it's a constant endeavor. So it's not about them, it's about me.
Good. And also what I'm getting is also, how can I serve here? What can I give?
Yes,
how can I add value to this place?
Yes. Right? And it's helping me. It's not helping them, it's helping me be a better human being.
Indeed.
And towards my goal.
And by you being a better human being, from that place, you feel better about yourself. And so you're able to give even more refined qualities, more refined words, more refined contributions. Dhanam, charity. So a charity is a surefire method, a definitive method, a certain method to test how much attachment you really have to material objects. Because we said that the mark of a spiritual and advanced master, the one who has a proper relationship to material objects. Now we say, oh, that's great. I have a proper relationship. But I interrupt you right there and I say, okay, let's see. How much attachment or how much could you go for without those things that are close to you? Suppose that your car gets taken away now, or something that you depend on, maybe your train tickets or some like your curtains or something that protects the room from the sun, anything that you think will make your life good. Suppose you take that away, right? And you go, oh, I'm thinking about it. Now, of course, you would think about it a lot at the beginning, but as the more days go by, the more we forget about it. Either way, this is a good method to test what is your relationship to things, right? Are you coming from an independent place, or your so-called independence is coming or is feeding itself from someone else and you don't even realize it? Right? We say, no, I'm independent. I'll master this. But we're saying that where? We're saying that in a place that we feel comfortable, in our comfort zone. So is that really true? Right? We don't really know. So the way to know, we say, okay, let me look at the things. Let me look at the money in my bank. Suppose all of that money was gone tomorrow. Okay, it would definitely not be good. It will be highly inappropriate. A huge inconvenience. Right? But how would you respond to that? In that moment, that reveals your relationship to the reality. If I get anxious, if I get angry and I start blaming, I say, why me? Who did this? They're going to pay down, do something to them. Or you say, okay, stop. Let me find out what happened. Let's get into solution mode. Let's call the bank. let's investigate the transactions, let me show them the bills, and you just act rationally and you act composing yourself. Composure is there in and through the entire process. You don't know that until it happens, but it tells you, nevertheless, how you act on the basis of the losses that we have. That reveals your emotional maturity. What is charity, if I ask you? We think of money or little coins being donated to the Red Cross or to the hungry or somewhere. But what is charity really, if you think about it? If you remove the monetary value out of it, what does it mean to give? And how do you give? Charity is to give, but how? What is your intention behind that giving? Is it to show others, how I can give? Hey, I gave. Here's how much I gave, right? Probably not. I think most of us are beyond that level. Is it giving because you're expecting something in the future? Maybe from God. Hey, God, I'm giving to the poor, to the kids. I hope you give me something. You don't have to, but I just, I wouldn't mind. That's still a very subtle version of not entirely healthy. Or you're just giving because you genuinely care. Hey, I have so much in my life, whatever it is, whether it's money, whether it's your love. I have so much that I really want to give because it makes me feel good to give that much. Because I know it's going to regenerate itself in my life. Because I know that, because I'm so certain, I have no issue giving. So first of all, giving, charity, releases this sense of scarcity. And scarcity is a poison. It's called a toxic poison for the soul, called scarcity mindset. I can't, there's no enough, there won't be enough in the future. Okay. Now, there's nothing wrong, by the way, with giving as much as you give. And that is, by the way, a law. You never give, whatever it is, more than you are capable intellectually and emotionally of giving. If you give more, it generates into resentment. And then that makes us get turned off from giving in the future. So we only give as much as we are comfortable. Giving produces adrashta palam. Adrashta palam means unseen consequences. That means they're delayed. You may not understand how you're giving to those things that are meaningful to you. You may not understand how that is coming back to you, but believe it or not, the system, the grand order is designed in such a way that it has to give you back because it is a wonderful impersonal cause-effect system. For every cause, there has to be an effect. That is law. That's called adrashta palam. It makes you feel good about yourself when you give, genuinely, anonymously. Well, it doesn't have to be anonymous. It depends on the circumstances. We're not saying now, okay, I want to give, but I'm going to intentionally give anonymously. That is, again, ahamkara involved there, trying to enjoy itself as a good person and prove that to itself. You just give, right? So we get the knowledge, you give because you care, and you know it is going to regenerate itself. And then you don't leave it, you don't define it afterwards. Giving or charity also helps minimize the greatest fear, that is of death. Why so? Because death is the greatest charity there is. So even if you don't want to give, Ishvara forces you to give. Even if I don't go through a midlife crisis owing to my own self-inquiry, Ishvara forces a midlife crisis. So how is my relationship to death? Whereby I give away the body. That determines what is your relationship to giving right now. So my question is, are you giving, right? There are so many in this world who are needy. There are wonderful foundations where even $10, for example, or $20 a month, or whatever it is, can help a lot someone on the other side of the world who can enjoy a lot. There's a wonderful fellow who works with child laborers in India and also now in Africa. And he has a wonderful foundation that even has a donate button there. And that I found to be compelling. I said, I like this person, I like what he's doing, so I'm going to give. Now, if I cannot even give to that, then how will I give my body away in the final moments? So this is a wonderful way to cure your fear or distortion towards physical death by learning to give. Give what? Start with things that you don't need in the house. If you got an extra chair or something, in Australia, we have, you can put on Gumtree, for example. You want to make friends really quickly, You just put up a, you know, like lawnmower or a leaf blower, put it on a gum tree. Within an hour, you already have 12 to 20 inquiries already. And they will just come and they will take it away. Make a lot of friends in less than an hour. Okay, so we can start with things that we don't need. Right? Look around your house, like, why do you need that? And then you have to what? Pass it on to your grandchildren. Now they have to get rid of it, because if they really wanted your stuff, they would have come to your house and they would have grabbed it. But the fact that they haven't obviously means they want your stuff even after you go. Okay, so big job for the kids to clean up, because the parents didn't really give. Okay, so again, giving is something that is a huge part of the Vedic culture. In India, for example, it's a great system in reference to giving, because it's set up ashrama temples. You can always, to the ashrams, you can always donate. In the West, we call it the online websites. We call it foundations where you can donate. Press the button and again, click donate. Of course, you want to research. You want to make sure that you feel good about what you're doing. In Islam, we also have give 5% of your earnings. So whatever you earn, you give 5% to.
Interestingly, in the Christian tradition, there's a saying that charity begins at home.
Because after all, who is Ishvara? What is Ishvara? The ultimate giver. So by aligning myself with the role of Ishvara, and the scriptures point out clearly, the more I align myself with the Vyavaharika world, with the world of the laws and orders, the greater my cheerfulness, the greater my freedom.
Charity can come in many forms. It doesn't have to be money. It can be love or time.
Beautiful.
So some of the people that I look after are really lonely. So if you just sit in their room for 5 minutes and just ask them how they are and take an interest in their life, you can try to remember things about their lives and talk about it. I find that they just feel alive again. They feel so valued.
And Ishvara gave you what you have to give anyway. It's not yours.
Exactly. So in other words, now I have to thank the giver. How so? By giving.
Spreading it around. You didn't really
exactly.
do that. I mean,
and the irony is, if I don't do what I'm imposed with, the qualities that I came with, then as chapter 3, verse 30, Krishna would say, you know, how to live happily. Just do your duty without any expectations of the future, without any expectations of the result, and concentrate all of your results onto me, knowing that everything comes from me and everything goes to me. So what do you have to do to give? Just give that which you are coming intrinsically with as a human being. As I said, your emotional and intellectual makeup. Damaha, the liberation of the physical body. The physical body is deliberate. The senses are deliberate. Right? The way you talk, you're deliberate about that. Every word that's coming out is accurate. Right? It's captured in your buddhi. So no word passes that buddhi, that discern, that viveka. Like, here's what words are. Wrong word, let me recede back. So let's take some training to capture every word. Capturing the way you're walking. Right? Is it off balance? Is it too fast? Is it perhaps could be slowed down? Right? I'm deliberate about where each step is landing onto the ground and what pressure is pressing. And is the pressure different between left leg and the right leg? And how are the waves? How are the arms waving while walking? How are the shoulders moving? Is it contracted? Am I walking, like stiff? Or am my shoulders relaxed? And which part is stiff? Is it the upper part, the middle part, the lower part is stiff? Are hands in the pockets or are they outside? At the back? Where are they? So this is deliberate. And you say, what's the point of doing this? Anything that you do at a body level spills over into everything else. And one of the easiest things you can do is start practicing at the body level. And that sense of deliberation just finds itself infringing upon your thoughts. And therefore the thoughts start to slowly become deliberate. Okay. So deliberation does not mean suppression, by the way, suppressing. I'm going to suppress my sense organs. No, you're just exposing your sense organs deliberately. I want to see that and not that. I want to hear that and not that. In other words, you are the controller of what senses get exposed to, instead of just letting the senses flap around, whatever is presenting in front of me. That's what wow. Okay, so you say, no, that's not what I have. That's not what I know to be right. That's not what I know to be valuable. Let me turn the senses to that which I know to be valuable in life. Otherwise, vasana goes, oh, no, I want to turn this way. I'll go, oh, okay, that feels good. It only feels good for what? The vasana. It doesn't feel good for you, the individual. It only feels good for one little part in the psyche, but everything else wants something else. So he's saying, no, vasana, you have done your job for too long. Done a good job, but no more. Let me turn the head this way. And then again, okay, let's turn. Okay, elastic band. So we have to keep practicing, okay? Until eventually you let go and it's, no, come, and it stays there. So this takes deliberate training. Yajna, this is the next quality, Daiva Sampat. This is relationship to divinity. What is our relationship to divinity, to the highest? There are two types of Yajna. The first one is ritualistic. This is formal. It is memorized. Okay, something that's ritual that you memorize and you do it. And it produces a sense of release, a sense of accomplishment. Like, yes, I feel released from my concerns, from my worries. Puja, mantra, prayer, all of these are memorized. So you'd find something that is memorized, like a little short verse. And by the way, don't memorize things in languages that you don't understand, right? Oh, look, there's a Sanskrit verse, I'm going to memorize that. No, do it in your local language, because at least in your local language, the one that you closely relate to, there is meaning behind those words. Otherwise, you might as well just chant in Japanese or South Korean or German or Spanish. It's just sounds. So Sanskrit sounds, English sounds, Hindi sounds, Tamil sounds, they're all just sounds. What matters is what sounds do I emotionally connect with. I promise you, if you're chanting a verse in a foreign language, there is no connection to that at all. But the person, of course, is going to say, no, you don't understand. Sanskrit is a divine language. It is all divine sounds. Yes, carries a high vibration. There are sounds before we fly off into the spiritual world of projections. Okay, it's a beautiful language, as all are beautiful in their own right. So memorize something, some verse that captures you, that hooks you, and you go, I love it. It really moves me, right? What should I do? How should I do it? How should I conduct myself when the tough gets going? Let me memorize that verse. That is called category number one, formal, ritualistic, regular, memorized puja, mantra, chant, or prayer. Okay, and this inaugurates spirituality. It brings about that air of religion, of divinity into your space immediately. The second type is converting ordinary, mundane actions into worship. Ordinary, mundane actions. This is called karma yoga. What does this mean? I'm applying yoga. In other words, I'm spiritualizing, I'm yoganizing my karma, my actions. I'm incorporating divinity into my actions. Yoga into karma is karma yoga. When you brush your teeth, for example, instead of going, I'm going to brush my teeth, take a moment and say, oh Lord, please brush my mind. Okay, now let's brush my teeth. 1 second, I converted ordinary mundane activity into a little prayer. Before writing a report for the colleague or at work and sending it off as an email or a CV or whatever it is that you do, with all respect to your job, whatever it is that you do, remember before handing that in, that is affecting someone's life. And that someone who is reading it could get either touched by it, or they can say, oh, that's another report. And so what do we do in this understanding? We see all actions that are dropped down like a little rubber ball. Sometimes bounce at the beginning and it's exciting, but then it slows down and it's in front of you. And now the ball is confronting you and you say, what relationship do I have with this? Ishwara prasadaha. It is a gift, customized. Hey, work with it. Here, my dear. What do you want to do with it? And you say, okay, now let me work with this gift. And I'll give you a great example of what Ishwara prasadaha is. In the Ramacharita Manasa, Balakanda Doha, Ramacharita Manasa is the river of deeds of Rama. Rama is the embodiment of dharma. So in other words, all of the deeds of Rama are flowing like a river. Ramacharita Manasa. There's a story of Narada. And Narada was a wise person who fell in love with a beautiful, deluding damsel called Vishma Mohini. He saw her, he was hooked. I need her, I want her. So Narada goes to the Lord and he says, Lord, please make me handsome so that I may make her my dear to me. And so the Lord gave him a face, and he didn't know what kind of face he got. So he goes up to her, okay, and he presents his face to her, and she just starts laughing. And he didn't know what's wrong. He was upset. He goes to the pond, he looks at his face, and it's a monkey face. And he's now so angry. Like, how dare Lord turns me into a monkey? I got insulted by her. I don't stand any chance with her. So he goes back to the Lord and he's angry. He complains, why did you give me a monkey face? Why did you give me this Ishvara Prasada as a monkey? And then Ishvara reveals, the Lord reveals, this Vishwa Mohini was actually a deluding damsel. She was actually very ugly. She was there to trick you. But you thought that she was beautiful because you couldn't see further. And so I saved you. In other words, when we receive that Ishvara Prasada in front of us, like a little ball, then you may not like it, but the fact is, it is a gift of Ishvara. And you really don't know if it's actually a good something that's going to help you or save you as something that's going to hinder you. You just don't know. So this means that I'm always receiving that intelligence from the Lord. And I do not know if it's good or bad for me, but it is still a gift. So that's Yajna, 2 types, memorized and improvised. Karma yoga is improvised. Would you like to give me an example of improvising karma yoga in life?
One of the things that I generally do is cooking, quite a lot of cooking. So it's quite frequent for the family, for friends. And when I cook, I always think, okay, I'm going to actually offer this to God. Is it good enough to be offered? And if it's not good enough, then I got to add something or, take away something and redo some, sort of like, that is the sort of notion I have behind me. I may not say it or show it to the family, but I cook, I make sure that this is going to be really tasty, the food.
One thing I like to do, Andre, is if there's a really boring, dull job that needs to be done, I just do it, and I just think, oh, well, I'm just going to offer it to the field. That's how I say it to myself. To have a higher altar helps me. I'm not doing it for myself. I'm offering it to Ishvara. And that I just that it gives me strength to do. There's lots of boring things sometimes, unfortunately. And that just relieves me of the responsibility that I'm doing it for myself. Right. Because actually it's easier to do things for other people usually. Yeah. Big respect.
So there's something that I've recently started, which I've started doing. This works in the Indian context specifically. Whenever a person comes to your house, you always try to offer them food as assuming that they are guests. But we have some people who come in to help, like most Indian houses would have somebody to come in to help. And lately, what I've been doing is whoever comes to my house, I make it a point to feed them, because food is a very big thing, it's a very basic thing. So whatever I'm making for the day for myself and family, there's some portion which I leave specifically for the people who are going to come to my house. So I feel very good about it, and it really has touched them, because food is something so basic. And I see the smile on their face, and it just makes my day.
Andre, like after listening to all your lessons and implementing in the life, when I go for a walk, as you said, like just remember, you're walking on the back of the God, giving massage to the Lord. So sometimes, I think of Lord in every moment, even in breathing, and looking at trees. So just reminding myself, you're doing everything for Ishvara, end of the day. So even going to the job and, every single moment just reminds me, karma yoga.
In each and everyday activities, my mind is doing those activities. The powering factor for my mind is the Ishvara only. That is the Atma. Atma is nothing but the manifestation of the Brahman. Who is doing our action? The Brahman is doing our action. Brahman is the power behind our action, which is doing for the other Brahman, which is also the Brahman. So Brahman is doing the action for the Brahman. That is the concept of karma yoga.
So creator is doing the act. In this case, he's talking about Brahma as the creator. He's not talking about Brahman, the awareness consciousness.
My inner, that is my subtle body, is powered by the Brahman only. That is the ultimate God, Parampurul. Parampurul, through my senses, it is doing the duty to the Parampurul. Another Brahman. Brahman, the manifestation of all these things in this entire prapancham or in the world is the Brahman only.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Brahman is doing the job for the Brahman.
Exactly. So you're doing everything for yourself. You know, we would care for our bodies, we care for our minds. So imagine expanding that, or at least pretending as though you are just for a day, just see how it is, you know, as if you're actually dealing with one big body, one big body in whom the entire universe is contained. And that body is not away from self. Sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.